Hey there, welcome to GemIIToys. Here we are once again with yet another comparison video, taking a look at what I think are two wonderful Iron Man figures. We have on the left side from Infinity War, the Mark 50, and from Endgame on the right side we have the Mark 85. So we're going to be comparing pretty much everything and doing a little competition here, just like I did with Darth Vader. Of course, comparing the figures, head sculpts, accessories, boxes, and we're gonna have a little guest here, kind of like the referee. This head doesn't seem to get a whole lot of love in the community, but I actually do like it quite a bit, so thought I'd throw him in. And as mentioned, here we have the beautiful and my most recent purchase, the Mark 85 with all his accessories and stuff. So first, remember to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any future content like this. Let's compare the boxes first. Looking at the Infinity War Mark 85 one, does have that sturdy cardboard underneath this slip-on cover. I'm not a big fan of the slip-on covers, but it is there. And this one doesn't have one. It's just that sturdy, same sturdy cardboard, with a really nice image of the Mark 85 as well as a very glossy image of Avengers Endgame, or logo I should say, as well as some other ones around the box. It's got that nice glossy effect. I do like that on the Mark 85 one. The backs are quite similar, with some credits to the people who made these figures. And the design is a little bit different. This one is a two-piece. You slip those two pieces off to reveal the foam protection for the figure. It's white, Mark 85 is charcoal, and it does slip off from the side, and I do prefer that. So I'm going to give this one to the Mark 85. I do prefer the design of the box. We started getting this design box with the Mark 7 and I totally dig it. Further moving on, this is what the figures would look like in their respective foam protections. It's a real nice presentation for both Mark 85 and the Mark 50. Now they do have a bottom tray, and this is pretty much exactly the same, where you have some extra accessories, the base, and the batteries, as well as the manual. Next up, we're going to be comparing the accessories. We have each contender in the respective corners, starting with the Mark 50. Got 4 hands, as well as this kind of crab-like accessory. I'm not sure what the name of it is. It's got kind of that gun. I don't think you ever showed that in the movie. As well as, I'm going to call it for this video backpacks, for easy comparison. An assortment of batteries, as well as a screwdriver and some tweezers. Never really use those, but Mark 85, we have a very similar situation. 4 hands, 2 rubber, 2 articulated. We have 1 accessory, a real nice one though, and also a backpack. Lightning refocuser, if you will. So there you have that. And next up, we're gonna be taking a look at their respective backpacks, starting with the Mark 50. It does have some articulated pieces there. As you can see, they're delicate, but they do add to it. It's real nice. But I do prefer the design of the Mark 85s better, even though that centerpiece, I mentioned in my review, I don't like it too much. It kind of reminds me of when they're fighting in Titan, in the background, what it looks like, those ships. But I do like the design better. This is where they would connect to the back of the figure. And I have to say, the Mark 85 ones does stay better on the figure. It's kind of loose on the Mark 50. Here you have the accessories I mentioned before, as well as this neck piece for when you attach the head sculpt. Moving on to the Nano Gauntlet, beautiful piece. It's basically all he comes with, as well as a much better improved looking neck piece for the head sculpt with a magnet. So the Mark 50 does come with one more accessory. However, I think the accessories that come with the Mark 85 are better looking. I do prefer that Nano Gauntlet, and I do prefer the backpack. So I'm gonna give this to the Mark 85. So 1 point goes to Mark 85. Here I kind of wanted to show you that the Mark 50 could wear the Nano Gauntlet if you wish to do something like that, as well as this crab accessory could hook on to the Mark 85. They don't totally go on there, a little bit loose, especially on the Mark 50, but it could be done. However, the lighting feature, I'm not sure if that's possible. Now we're looking at the bases here. Very similar situation, you'll see. This is the type of base that we get with most Avengers figures. The Mark 85 one does, with the line of Endgame, I should say, they do have kind of a unique theme to them. In this case, it's red. With Infinity War ones, they're all the same. But I'm gonna call this a draw. It's basically the same thing, and I don't really like using these bases for dynamic poses or flight poses. So we're just gonna leave it at no point for either one. Next up, we're gonna be comparing the figures, and along comes the suits, of course, that they're wearing for each of their respective films, as well as helmet sculpts. Now, I didn't install batteries on either one of these figures, but I will tell you the process is pretty much identical, and they look pretty much the same when they're lit up. So I didn't feel there was a need for that. Here we're taking a look at the Mark 50 from Infinity War. Very much like a creature that lives in the sea. Kind of reminds me kind of like a fish or a crab. But I do really like it. And here we have the Mark 85 from Endgame. Much more shiny, as he does have much more gold, and much more like he was in the comics. So taking a look at these two together, my eye does go more to the Mark 85. I know he's a new figure, but I think he's just, the proportions look better, just looks more buffed, especially in the shoulder area. And you don't have that gap in the thighs so noticeable on the Mark 85. Taking a look at the backs here, very similar situation with articulation. However, I'll show you that in a minute. A little bit the differences in that. But my eye does go more to the Mark 85. Yep. This suit also is more, I think, more like for space, I want to say, as Infinity War did take place in space. Now, source material wise, I do really like Infinity War. However, I must say I didn't like how the CGI of the suit looked in the movie, as opposed to the Mark 85 looked better. But Infinity War definitely has a special place in my heart. And here we're taking a look, as I mentioned, at the articulation. I feel the neck articulates a little better on the Mark 50. He looks a little bit more up. Here we have all these flaps that allow for articulation. Now, I did feel like the thighs on this one, the Mark 50, do articulate better. Maybe it's because they're more loose, and he does have that toe articulation, just like you can see here. A little bit different design in the engineering and all, but functionally pretty much the same. However, on this guy, the leg articulation, I feel like I couldn't pull down on those legs like you can do on the Mark 50 to allow more space for articulation. But as you can see here, the bending of the arms is better, and he doesn't look up as high, but that's a minor difference. overall, we were looking at a very similar situation with some slight improvements to the Mark 85. Now, here I did take off some of the parts. You can see here the helmets. So you can see installing the batteries, you would take the top of the helmet off on the Mark 85 and the faceplate off on the Mark 50. Took off the chest pieces. That way you can see what they both look like without them. Very, very similar situation. There you can see the Mark 50. And these flaps both have a similar situation, I want to say, is they do seem very delicate, and I'll show you that in a minute. Got to be very careful. This one does have a couple extra flaps on the sides, but this one that I'm demonstrating here, it's kind of a delicate piece, so be careful when pulling on it or pressing on it. When handling the figure, especially if you press on these pieces, they could break off. I've had no trouble so far with either figure, but just be aware that that is there, and be careful. Okay, so for this next shot, I had to put these two figures together. It almost looks very, very awkward. However, this was the best I could do to compare the two helmet sculpts. Now first, let's take a look at the Mark 85 here. They're very similar, but when looking at them closely, there is quite a few differences. Even in the faceplate, the expression is different. And I thought they were the same. They both have kind of that insect-like looking, but here you can see this is more fish-like, I almost want to say. And you do have some weathering on both, some nicks, a little more noticeable on the faceplate of the Mark 85, especially in the eyebrow area, I want to say, over the visor. But here you can really see, yeah, the expression is different. Looks more serious, the Mark 50, more upset. Definitely there's some differences there. So I will say I do love the Mark 50 suit, and especially the source material. However, I do like the Mark 85 better. I think it's more Iron Man, it's more comic accurate, and definitely more iconic, as this is the last suit he ever wore. So this is a definite point for the Mark 85. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at the Tony Stark head sculpts, as well as comparing the facial likeness. Now, I'm not going to get too much into what my opinions are or thoughts about the Mark 85 head sculpt, as I did express those in my review. With that said, we will be comparing them in this video, starting with the Mark 51. This is a very nice head sculpt that's been used for a few Iron Man figures, and rightfully so, as I do like it quite a bit. And then Hot Toys presented us with this head sculpt with something fresh and new that a lot of people liked and a lot of people didn't like so much. Me personally, I would have preferred the one that they announced with the prototype, which is why I'll be participating in the exchange program here in Japan. Should be receiving the new head sculpt in September, and definitely will be doing a video on that sculpt. Very curious to see what it will look like. Let's take a look at the back of the heads. I feel like Tony's hair in Endgame was a little bit longer than that, but they both look pretty good. And here is our guest head, made by Max Newt, and I do love this head. The paint application is not quite Hot Toys level, but it's really, really good. And I really like the expression on his face. It's for very specific poses, but I think the likeness is pretty good. By the way, on the Mark 85, the paint application is really, really good. Regardless of what you think of this head sculpt, paint application is quite excellent, superior to the two head sculpts next to it. But when it comes to facial likeness and the image I have in my head of Tony Stark, the Max Newt head stands out as the strongest, regardless of what you think of this head sculpt. He's taking a dump or he's too cockeyed. I think the likeness is really, really strong. However, as I did mention before, the Max Newt head is not a part of this competition. This is between the Mark 50 and the Mark 85. But just for fun, let's take a look at the back of the heads, starting with the Mark 50. Then the Max Newt head, I just feel like this is the proper length of the hair. I feel like that's what he looked like when they're getting ready to face Thanos. But regardless, as I said before, this is between these two. So when I think of Tony Stark, this is the image I have of him in my head. And what does that match? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. The Mark 50 looks that much more like it. Let's continue a little bit further here. I did take off the two heads so I can show you what the neck piece looks like connected there. And doesn't this look good? I love how this looks. I hope the replacement head we get looks actually better than this. Would be nice, but if it looks like this, I'm pretty happy. However, I wanted to test this head with the Mark 50 just to see what that looks like. Not terribly happy with how it looks. Looks interesting. I just do like the Mark 50 head quite a bit better, which is why I'm looking forward to the replacement head. And it's so cool that Hot Toys is doing that for us. I do appreciate trying to give us a more aged and film accurate head for the Mark 85, but I don't feel it worked. So this is an obvious point for the Mark 50, as I feel the likeness is much stronger. I had to mess around with the Max Newt head a little more and couldn't wait to see what this head looks like on the armor I think the head was made for, which is the Mark 85 armor, and meant for this pose. That final iconic pose of I am Iron Man. Really like how this looks. I'm so happy this armor came with the nano gauntlet, so I can do this pose. Probably pose them up like this on the shelf for a while, as I do like it quite a bit. I did want to mention in regards to doing this pose, taking a look down next to the knees, there's those plastic flaps and they stick out, and this is a heavy figure, so the figure's weight does go on those pieces and it may damage them over time. So taking a final look here first of the Mark 50. I've really enjoyed this figure for a long time. He's got his accessory there. And Mark 85 holding his nano gauntlet. I do like this figure quite a bit better now. So needless to say, the obvious winner is the Mark 85. I hope you've enjoyed this video. For me, it was a lot of fun comparing these two, as they're great pieces and very interesting seeing them side by side. I hope this also has helped you make a decision between perhaps one of these two figures. If it comes to source material and you prefer one of them too, you can't go wrong with either one, as both are great pieces, but my favorite is the Mark 85, as he is more comic accurate and just more of a iconic look for Iron Man. So that concludes this video. Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the path of collecting, and I will catch you guys next time.